whatever sort you choose. So we've turned this into an intimate event, despite the microphone. So my name is Andrea Douglas, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center. I just wanted to say a few words before we get started to give you some notion of where you are. You are sitting in the 1926 auditorium of the African American High School. And when, I'm sure most of you know this story, Charlottesville's narrative is not that much different from the sort of space of Black education in other places. So prior to the opening of this school, if you were Black and you wanted an education past the age of 14, you would have to leave. The project that allows us to be here was a project that renovated this entire building, which was, by 1959, 72,000 square foot, almost 4 acres long, and about a 100-year history, 80-year history of African-American education. The Jefferson School starts in this community in 1865. And so we are proud to be able to say that the founding of the Jefferson School as both a normal school and a graded school is also the history of public education. Until 1966, when it ultimately is closed and becomes Charlottesville's 6th grade. So these are the original floors. These, outside of turning it into an auditorium, are the 6 classrooms around the central auditorium. It's added on to in 1938, it's added on again in 1959, and added on again finally in 58, and then finally in 59. So, it holds the story of our people. We always talk about the ancestors. Some days the tech works, some days the ancestors say, no, we're not doing that tonight. So I hope that you, in your brain, are sort of, giving offerings to those ancestors, because their spirit is around the walls here, and it is strong in our memory. So what we're going to talk about tonight is a project that we have been working on urgently since 2018, but has its origins in 2016. My colleague, Dr. Jalane Schmidt, is going to sort of begin with a history, and then I'm going to pick up a little later on with where this project sits now.
Hi, thank you for coming. I'm Jalane Schmidt. I'm with the University of Virginia Carter Institute of Democracy's Memory Project. And we are a sponsor of the Jefferson School's led project of classes. I want to just kind of get a sense for how many of you have seen this picture before? Does this look familiar to anybody? Can you raise your hands high? I just want to say, okay, all right, wonderful. So this is a picture of the assembly, you might say, of Charlottesville's Robert E. Lee statue. And it is one of the New York Times best pictures of 2023, actually, and it is, of course, has a Charlottesville connection here. So, but the origins of this lay in 2016 with a local high school student, Zion Bryant, high school student, who started a petition to remove the Confederate statues in Charlottesville. Hundreds of people signed the petitions, but it should be acknowledged, just for the sake of honesty here, that a counter petition to maintain the statues garnered even more signatures. So the new position in our community in Charlottesville here was in the minority of publicly expressed opinion, that is, and those that that wanted these statutes to be removed or kind of dismissed as divisive and effectively told that we should know our place. And so it's this notion of place and Black people in public spaces that I want to emphasize here, because that's what the source of the Plowshares project is about, is Black people claiming our spaces, our space, as members of the polity, and as having a rightful place in our community's places. So Zion's petition was brought to City Council. Only 2 out of 5 of the members were supportive. The mayor at that time had ambitions for higher office, and he and many of the other kind of so-called thought leaders, including, I should add, local UVA faculty, I was the rare exception, presented themselves as the voice of reason, chastising impetuous activists, and they tied themselves in rhetorical knots. Self-identified progressives favored retaining the statues in the name of teaching history, often. We've got a couple of members of the Blue Ribbon Commission on Race, Memorials, and Public Spaces here in the audience. I see Professor of History, Jalane Schmidt, here. Raise your hand, please, John. Thank you. And also, of course, Dr. Douglas herself, who is also a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission here in our audience. So the question of, should the statues remain in place to teach history? Activists, whom I identify as an activist, kind of our retort to that was, teach history to whom? Yeah. I don't need a rights-only sign affixed to public spaces so that I won't, quote-unquote, forget history. So this is a very set of conversations that we had going here in 2016. And so here is the Blue Ribbon Commission, and you might recognize this space. It is where you are sitting right now, actually, in the auditorium of the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center. And so the City Council, the Charlottesville City Council, appointed a statute commission to study the matter of what to do with these Confederate statues, and responding to that initial petition that was put forth. And Dr. Douglas and Dr. Jalane Schmidt served on this 9-member commission. And so this is one of the meetings of the commission, public meetings that took place in this very auditorium. Now, usually a commission is where good ideas go to die. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of diddling talk, a lot of presentations, and then the commission files a final report, which goes on the shelf and nothing comes out. But with Charlottesville Statute Commission, something else happened. And that is that the Statute Commission provided an opportunity for a more sustained excavation of local Black history and explanation of how race is mapped onto space in Charlottesville. We were learning together in public. What's going on in the early 20th century, not only in Charlottesville, but all over the country, really, is a movement called the City Beautiful movement. And this was an urban planning movement that sought to kind of order public spaces, or ostensibly public spaces. Because part of the order that was taking place was imposing race upon place in order to expel Black people from those spaces, from having access to those spaces, and to more firmly establish them as white space. And so what happens next to the courthouse there, after the installation of Johnny Webb in 1909, is that there is a neighborhood there called McKee Row, which was a Black and mixed-race neighborhood. There were Black property owners, such as John West, who had properties there. And a wealthy Charlottesville native called William McIntyre has made a lot of money on the stock markets in Chicago and New York. And he's seen, in Chicago and New York, what this City Beautiful movement has done in those places. And he does that for his own hometown, too. Called William McIntyre comes home and begins to exert his philanthropic presence in the community, and purchases through an agent this property known as McKee Road. The property owners there are steadily bought out and renters are pushed out. And you know what amounts to basically is a gentrification effort. The buildings are leveled, it's turned into work farm, and it says right there in the deed that this is to be named Jackson Park, where a statue is to be placed there of Stonewall Jackson. So what had been Black and White Springs neighborhood becomes a park that is anchored by a Confederate statue.
Another exercise of Mr. McIntyre's magic has moved the exactly pile of buildings known as a key block adjoining Courthouse Square, and there we shall see, in bronze, an expression of the austere dignity, the heroic spirit which made out Stonewall Jackson.
The discussion that begins to ensue about what he wrote is very similar to a discussion that would be used to displace Black people in this community on more than one occasion. And it is a discussion about how this particular community is noisy or dilapidated or is out of the back.
All right, thank you. We'll go to yet another clip here. So what I was emphasizing is that we were learning the history of our community while in public with one another in settings such as this, where people are coming up to the microphone and kind of testifying to the history of how their grandmothers were displaced and this sort of thing. And kind of unveiling, which is the title of this documentary, this PBS documentary here, unveiling the history of spaces that have kind of tacitly been raised as white, racialized as white, and unearthing, excavating their Black history. So here on the installation of the Lee statue in 1924. So the Racial Integrity Act goes into effect in early 1924, and then what we have in early May of 1924 is the installation of the Lee statue. This ceremony again coincided with the statewide reunion of the United Confederate Veterans. Do you see these accounts? This delegation from Maryland was coming in, or this dignitary from Richmond, you see the kind of this build up that's going on. You can just imagine, it's a small southern town in the 1920s. So this is a big deal, to kind of make Charlottesville the center of lost cause nostalgia and Native Confederate organizations.
The dark days of Reconstruction were worse than war. The social triumph of the South was a reincarnation of the spirit of Lee.
One of the speakers at the 1924 Lee statue unveiling was W. McDonald Lee. He was the commander of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and he was also a Klansman, which is to say that 1924 white Charlottesville elites were not averse to rubbing shoulders with a Klansman. In the days after the reinstallation, again, there's just this uptick in Klan activity, and you have a Klan march that's going down Main Street and ending at Vinegar Road, this Black neighborhood, which must have been very intimidating. You had a bombing. The Klan set up a bomb outside a Black church out in the county. And John West, who was this Black man who was a property owner, he was also a barber, and he had his house done West. He was out on the porch watching this Klan parade go by. And John West says to his family, even though they had their hoods on, I don't know who everyone was. I recognized their shoes. He was looking for tips. And he noticed that some of his clients were Klansmen. And that kind of intimidation and having to make your way could not have been easy. There are these markers that are going on that are kind of presenting Charlottesville's public spaces with a white supremacist narrative. And we have this settler colonialist narrative of subduing Indian land. And, the case of George Rogers Clark, conqueror of the Northwest, it's a literal genocidal campaign. And this is what's being looked at as honorable, as worthy of memorialization. Thank you. So as these meetings in 2016 are going on, these meetings of the Blue Ribbon Commission, of the Statute Commission, this is coinciding with the 2016 Trump presidential campaign, and the influence of that cannot be overstated here, as there were expressions of white grievance politics on the national stage are being echoed, in our local discussions here, which were sometimes quite heated, as you might imagine. And so some of the original attendees of the commission meetings have been older white residents, and you see the lower right here, and some of whom later became plaintiffs against the city to protest the removal of statues. So these original attendees, these older white residents and mainstream local news outlets tended to favor maintaining the statues in place. And, at the end of the day, Charlottesville is a small southern town, and it should be said, that even a significant portion of black residents, or those who voiced an opinion anyway, were apathetic or quiet, or when vocal, they said that they preferred to keep the statues. And we can hear from John Edwin Mason and Andrea later about this. And that was in the pragmatic interest of avoiding controversy or preserving political energy for other priorities, this sort of thing. And of course, white politicians really used this conservative position of these black elders as a cudgel against younger activists then. And we activists were subjected to kind of patronizing lectures about history and dismissed as wanting to erase history, kind of all the standard arguments. And so I engaged on a practice of what I call amplifying footnotes. And this you can see that the young people here are wearing T-shirts that say, "We stand with the 52%. And so this is a fact, believed in the census report of 1860. We kind of gained the upper hand rhetorically when we presented demographic and historical facts about Charlottesville's local population, which was the fact that over half the residents were enslaved at the time of the Civil War. And so it was actually the statues that had erased history. And more young people started showing up at these public meetings, at these commission meetings, and wearing these matching 52% campaign T-shirts and signing up to speak. And this helped to shift the statute commissioner's deliberation, and we can hear later from our audience members who are members of the commission, what they thought of this. And so this, the lead up to this was, after showing up in months of contentious public statute commission meetings, the vote went to city council, and the council voted in February 2017, voted 3-2, right, divided vote in favor of removing the Robert E. Lee statue. This was immediately, after that contentious city council vote. For much of 2017, February through October, neo-Confederates and fascists repeatedly gathered at downtown bars and rallied around the Lee statue. Republican political candidates such as Corey Stewart, who's pictured here, held campaign rallies at the Lee statue. And community members organized counter-protests. So our position is that we would not allow white supremacists to gather in our public spaces uncontested. And so months before the publicly publicized United White rally, there were fights that were erupting around the Lee statue, and folks were being arrested. And there was a steady influx of smaller, less publicized appearances by white supremacists, and no matter the time of day or night, once an alert came out at 10:30, and I literally got out of bed and ran to the park. You can see the Lee statue here in the background of this torch rally. Our position as activists was that we would not allow white supremacists to make propaganda images and videos against the backdrop of our community's statues, which we did not approve of them being there in public spaces. So our goal was to have signs of dissent breaking into the frame of any images, so that these white supremacists would never have the unobstructed sightlines that they considered flattering. And so holding public space, and this is part of a kind of democratic imperative of claiming one's space, even in these purportedly public spaces, means a little disruption of white supremacy. And when one of the agents, it could be said, in this public space is an actual statue that stands there and has been there for a century, you can't do anything about that. But when people are coming to town, you can at least disrupt that tableau. And so, again, there were lots of fights, arrests, and this sort of thing. The kind of locally or moderate voices of reason admonished activists for stirring things up, we're just making things worse, and just leave them alone and let them have their say, and don't do this. And then, as many of you have seen, at the Unite the Right rally on August 11th and 12th of 2017, there were some 700 to 800 white supremacists who violently attacked Charlottesville. And their slogans were telling, you will not replace us, the Jews will not replace us. And so the grievances about place and space and who should occupy it and whose narratives and heroes should populate those spaces were front and center during these days. But of course, locally here, we've been talking about this already for a year, more than a year by that point. But how is space to be shared, and what does this say about belonging, in a democratic polity was created? And so this, you see, some of the struggles over public spaces here. And the sorts of claims that were being made, in this case, definitively, not always discursively. But so were the attacks. And so we had one attendee, white supremacist, ran his car into the crowd of protesters that were gathered and murdered Heather Howell, a member of our community. And so this was, that was the very people who were attempting to claim public spaces and belonging in public spaces for a cause that would promote racial justice, were literally violently attacked by those who opposed that. And she said that the fight to remove our statues still wasn't over, even after this horrific moment in 2017. For 4 years after this Unite the Right rally, we still had state law and civil lawsuit to contain it. And the statute stayed in place until 2021, actually. And so my colleague, Dr. Douglas and I, as these court cases and legislative battles were raging on, Dr. Douglas and I developed public walking tours as an accessible way to teach public history. And the pedagogical goal of our walking tours was to denaturalize public spaces, which had tacitly been racialized as white. And we were doing this by revealing their Black histories, which had been erased. And in the case of Charlottesville, with UVA graduate student research team, including Jalane Schmidt, who published their findings about how the early 20th century installation of Charlottesville's Stonewall Jackson Monument had displaced Black residents, like what you saw earlier in that documentary film clip. So amplifying this footnote about the relationship between Confederate statues and Black displacement informed emerging land use policy debate in Charlottesville about gentrification and affordable housing then. And just recently, about 3 months ago, I guess, the end of December, the city council recently passed a new zoning code which will allow for more options in terms of housing stock. And then we took our expanded knowledge to more public spaces, and in this case the state legislature. There was a century-old Virginia state law that we sought to change that still referred to the Civil War as part of the war between the states. Imagine that. And this is embedded in the statute itself. So modeled upon statute removal campaigns in other cities, like taking down Monroe and others. We founded an organization taking down Seawell to lobby in the State House. And our own state senator was kind of lukewarm at best, didn't really expend a lot of political capital, securing co-sponsors for this bill, died a quiet death in the subcommittee. And so then we came back the next year, after the Dems and a trifecta in the election, the House, Senate, of the General Assembly, and governorship. And really pushed forward. And this was the highest percentage of Black elected officials in Virginia since Reconstruction. So, very, important to point this out. So taking a space politically, and flexing political power, here is what was needed in order to kind of have representation in actual, the spaces of our landscape. And so the statewide coalition running on Justice Virginia banded together activists from several Virginia municipalities, went to the Capitol in Richmond, about 3 days a week, actually, in 2020, talking about in the legislature. We finally did get it passed, has to be said, with Senator Maynard Mock and Delegate Dolores Quinn, two black members of the General Assembly, form black strongholds of our state that carried the bill through the Senate and the House, respectively. And so this was, a lot of work here. But even though the state statute law changed in 2020, Charlottesville was still bound by civil lawsuits. So basically, after United Right, all around the country, different cities are removing their statutes. We remember that stage of statute. And here we are in Charlottesville trying to get our statute, and we had to sit with them for another 4 years. It was a very bitter pill, to see this going on, that our struggle had inspired, to see this going on all over the country, and ours are still in place. But so it was, for another 4 years. Just a lot of flaming hoops. So while the civil lawsuit is going through, some of the same white supremacists that had planned and attended the United Right rally in Charlottesville, it went on then to attack the Capitol building, on January 6th. And some of the very same people who had been on stage were then attacking the Capitol building. So this was what we were warning against as activists, as people were being dismissed for showing up in public. All right? And challenging us as this isn't just about Charlottesville, this isn't just about the police statute. They want to take over everything they do. And now, I hope, that more people can see this. That this was just a bad signal for them, as it were, So we didn't have legal permission, from the Supreme Court of Virginia yet to remove our statutes. And so we're standing in our parks for another 4 years at the United Right. And meanwhile, on the vigilantes, so-called statue guards, started what they call a patrol, of the downtown parks, accosting passers-by and people they suspected of being graffiti artists and the like. And so this created a sense, especially in the summers of 2019, 2020, and 2021, until even the last day before the statute removal, there were these vigilante and federal armed guards that were there. So we can play the 911 tape. 911.
I'm with Foursquare, and you guys wouldn't like to somebody. Foursquare in.
I'm sorry, the Foursquare in?
Yeah.
The N is
yes.
Okay, what's going on?
Somebody was calling on me on a bike, and the guys shooting, not shooting at me, just, that was nothing to do with that.
Who has it? The one with the...
I don't know what's going on.
Okay, I didn't ask you to yell, I asked you who has the rifle, the car or the bike?
The call. Somebody.
So the statute guards were pretty friendly with the local police force, who acted as a de facto extension of these white supremacists' defense of public space. And again, this is going on the 4 years after United Right. And to this day, white supremacists such as Patriot Front, you see their stickers here to their right, still come to Charlottesville and intimidate us. As recently as several weeks ago, they dropped a banner over the overpass and plastered their hateful propaganda posters in public locations. This is the successor organization to Stand By America, which was the organization, white supremacist organization, with which the car attacker was affiliated. That killed Heather Hunter. So these people are still coming to town. They come from many places all over the country. We saw them spill out the U-Haul moving truck in Idaho for the Pride Festival, right, the same people. And so this, that they're coming to, kind of antagonize our community and to insist upon white space. So this again, this sense of like, who belongs in what are ostensibly public spaces, who can claim, that there's space there and what narratives are going to be presented there as, inclusive of the entire community are kind of the questions that are, at stake here. And so, 4 years after the plan, the right laws, finally, we received permission from the Virginia Supreme Court to remove Charlottesville's monuments, giving the city's first black woman mayor oversaw this momentous occasion. And Kyle Walker, who's here at the podium, pictured the podium here, and Zion Bryant, the teenage activist who originally filed that petition 5 years before, is to vote himself. And the mayor said, this is just a first step, and to kind of not let folks off the hook that somehow removing the statue would solve everything, And fittingly, it was a black-owned construction company, Henry Enterprises, that removed the statue. A man who graduated from TCU from here in Norfolk, Devon Henry, that was his crew that did this. And so, the new statue finally was receded from Charlottesville's public spaces in July of 2021, but this brought up the question then of what to do with it. What do you do with these statues that have been removed? Because, at its most practical question is that a statue is a material object that takes up space, literal and figurative space. So it becomes a practical question. Where is it going to be? If it's not in a car, and we consulted with museums, nobody wants them, believe me. We talked to the Smithsonian, we talked to the American Civil War Museum, we talked to more reputable battlefields and museums, and nobody wants them. The only people who want them are the only people who should have them. And so this is a practical problem of where this is a physical object that takes up space. Where is it going to be? And somebody needs to take responsibility for this. And this is the, what I call kind of the moral risk of this. I mean, even if it sits in the public works yard, as you see here, to your right, it's taking up space at the public works yard. And so the question was, it's a buyer's market, as it were, for these statues. But it's the seller who needs to be driven. Because this is about what one does with toxic waste. And do you just ship toxic waste down the road to the next community? So, we're done with that, and we send it down there. There's no moral space. Whatever solution we arrive at is just a different set of ethical trade-offs. No matter what you do, including putting it down, which is what we ultimately proposed. And so the Charlottesville City Council also faced a political dilemma, which was how to properly deaccession these white supremacist icons. And so fortunately, the Jefferson School here made an offer to the City Council about how this question might be resolved. And it is called Swords of the Plowshares. I'm not the Andrea Douglas and I'm the Executive Director of the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center. Our hope with Swords of the Plowshares is to create something that transforms what was once toxic in our public space into something beautiful and more reflective of our entire community's social values. This project will take the lead statue, melt down the bronze, and use the bronze for a new work of public art. It is a community-based project that all of the voices of our community will be able to articulate what we want in our public spaces, as opposed to objects that were given to our community that highlight a particular ideology that we no longer share. We've been working on this for a long time. In 2015, a young woman, Jalane Schmidt, wrote a petition as part of the school project. 700 people signed, and she requested the statue be removed. After a long process and commission, the city voted to remove the statues. Because we wanted to change, we were attacked by white supremacists. The whole world saw our trauma, but more importantly, our resistance. Support for schools in the classrooms has been overwhelming. Our community will confront white supremacy with creativity. Beauty will heal the ugliness of the past. I think this project offers a roadmap for communities who are also grappling with what to do with their statues. It's taking something that was static, molding and melding it into a new substance, and then having a community dialogue with an artist about how to transform the material into something new. The process itself is changing. It allows us to understand that history is being made today, and that as we create change, we are in fact creating history. Creativity calls on the best parts of ourselves. It's transformative by its very nature. We're giving people opportunities to engage with our own narratives and our own histories. To make this transformation, we need your help. Please donate to Swords of the Plowshares. By donating to Swords of the Plowshares, you become part of history. Join us, be part of our team, help us create Charlottesville's new future. I will yield to my colleague, Andrea Douglas.
So I think it's a fitting segue to really begin to start talking about what does Swords into Plowshares look like now that we have done the act. And I wanted to start this conversation with a couple of quotes from Elizabeth Alexander from her Trade on Generation book. The first one, as with so many sites and communities, the future is a blank slate and an open door. One of the things that came out of the Blue Ribbon Commission was this idea that they would not really articulate for Charlottesville what an object could be. We were going to remove statues, what could we put in place? So there was always this openness, possibilities, which I think Swords and Plowshares is attempting to answer that question, what could possibly be there. And then sort of to reiterate what Dr. Schmidt was ending on, what our little film ends on, this talk about art and history as indelibles, that the idea that flesh, if they will outlive flesh, they offer us a compass or a lantern. And I think these are the things that I want to sort of describe and discuss as we are, I got it. So some of these images, you've seen the one on the far right already, but these two on the left and in the middle actually come from my personal cell phone. This is the night that we actually, in the dark, began early in the morning and ended in the dark, actually began to prepare the Lee statue for moving from Charlottesville to where we would continue to think about how we would break it down and then ultimately melt it in order to create the material that we would be using to articulate new objects. So I'm beginning with these images because for me they reflect a beginning of a new community engagement that allows us to investigate a broader set of cultural tropes that can be disaggregated from the symbolic representations of white supremacy. And as we start to think about what these objects were in our public spaces, in 1893, there is the first actual statue that is placed in the university, at the University of Virginia in the graveyard, which really is a kind of distinctive object in relationship to all the other objects that then ultimately become part of our public landscape. Because in reality, as you're looking and moving around that object, what you're witnessing on the facade of it is the actual names of those students who were bound to the University of Virginia and fought in the Civil War. So the truth of the moment of the university's engagement in the Civil War exists still in our public spaces today. And that object sits in counter to these other objects. And so my talk isn't at all about, or my set of conversation isn't at all about these objects. It's about what remains and what Swords in the Plowshares actually has to respond to. Because as we were thinking about these objects, we were also building objects. We were maintaining a kind of set of ideologies that continue this notion of white supremacy in our public space. And, when you start to break down this notion of what is a monument, right? How does a monument work? And if you focus on the idea that monuments articulate cultural value, then we can also think about buildings in our public space as articulating a kind of cultural value, right? And so this building was a building that was erected in 1938. It was one of 3 buildings that had been architecturally designed between 1916 and then this final building in 1938. And it's a co-joining of a kind of ideology in that front facade there, a Jeffersonian ideology, with then a more reaction to the lost cause, this notion of the idea of Southern progressiveness. So this sort of co-joining. And what's interesting to me is that this building is still in operation. It began as the Wright High School, but is now the county office building. And so in terms of our interaction with objects and buildings, this building still remains part of our consciousness. And so these are the kinds of things that I think that we need to become cognizant of as we're starting to think about what does a new project look like. This, I think I never did a presentation for this one before. So what are we building in our public spaces? This is something that exists at the University of Virginia. This is the monument to Kitty Foster. This was placed at the university in 2011. And it is a monument to Catherine Foster, or Kitty Foster, who was a free black woman. Right? And I'm particularly interested in this. This is something that was designed by African American designer Walter Hood. And its main feature, as you can see in that lower slide there, is a shadow catcher, which is a conceptual relationship with the house that actually stood on the site. Who Kitty Foster was, as I said, was a free black woman who served the university. She used to take in long range the story that she used to hide her guns for the university. But what's most important about her is because Virginia changed the laws of inheritance from the patrilineal line to the matrilineal line, we think of enslavement solely as the mother being the holder of this institution, but we fail to also remember that this is also a conversation of freedom, and I think this monument sort of allows us to think about that possibility as well. The other monument that was created in our public space within this same, the histories that Dr. Schmidt is talking about, these are the things that are ongoing. So as we're sort of fighting neo-nationalists and moving out of 2017, we're still thinking about what public space is holding, what kinds of values are being held. This is another object that was installed a little different from the Kitty Foster installation, largely because it is something that was installed by the African American community. It sits in front of Jackson P. Burley High School. It's a monument that the very alumni of the Black High School that opened in 1951 created for themselves. $75 to get your name on that monument, right? And then there's the monument to enslaved laborers that was installed and dedicated in 2019. That invites a kind of exploration, the opportunity to reach out and touch. It's got a tactile aspect to it. It's designed by design team Howard and Yoon, and it acknowledges the 4,000 or more individuals who built and maintained the university. This most recent one is the one that is the memorial that was most recently dedicated on June 17, 2023 at Monticello, designed by HGA and Nelson Bird Woods. It's a 60-foot long steel wall that lists the names of the 600 people in bondage at Monticello. And I think that as you start to think about what these objects look like, and the way in which, certainly the slide before and this one, sort of wants to engage with the landscape, there's a way in which these bodies are placed in the landscape, but we're still having to contend with that notion of what that landscape means and is. And I think that's an important place of consideration as we move into our understanding of the past and the present. So, and I think that's where what we're asking to do in Swords in the Plowshares, where its democratic process lives, but we hope to create a transformational space of welcoming. And as we were thinking about what that community engagement looked like, you could align that with what I consider to be phase one. And in phase one, we were asking a question in our community, what makes a comfortable space, and how does one define that comfort? And that's an interesting thing, again, as you start to consider the rhetoric of the time. What I'm showing you in the far left is something that comes from 1926. This is a book that was published by Charlottesville Chamber of Commerce in 1926. And I'm just going to read to you that first paragraph. Nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, thus protected from severe cold in the winter and heat in the summer, lies Charlottesville, Virginia. It is a garden spot of beauty where nature has been lavish in the distribution of golden sunshine, crystal waters, towering trees, enchanted hills, and an atmosphere as rejuvenating as the nectar of the gods. Right? And so this particular document juxtaposed with the fact that in 1926 the Public Assemblages Act was enacted, which made it illegal, ultimately, for blacks and whites to congregate in public space. So this narrative of Charlottesville was certainly not available for African American people. And the impact of the decisions around that 1926 moment are those that live with us today. They impact the decisions about people's physical, psychological, and financial well-being. But what's interesting as we start to think about what was happening post-2017, and this notion of outsiderness and a kind of trope that marries that as a physical form to whiteness, since it was whites who could occupy that public space. You have to think about what was also going on in 2017. And what I'm showing you on the far right is Charlottesville's response to what Jalane described as activism, as the activism of the time. And that was a set of ads that were being considered, that ultimately by 2019 had been rejected. But this idea of tying Charlottesville with the notion of civilization. And juxtaposing this notion of the atmosphere as rejuvenating as the nectar of the gods. What is the nectar of the gods? But that very wine glass that people clink at that moment as they're being bathed in the sunshine. This ad campaign was, the draft of it was using words like civilian and civility to promote the food and wine, music, and history of the area at the very moment that within our city council, we were having a conversation about civil discourse. Can one actually be in city council and be disruptive? So this way in which we have to, and I think schools and classes has to contend with not the history of the past, but our present histories in order to create an object that then moves us into the future. But the other thing that we have to recognize is that if you accept the notion that a monument can be a building, and that monuments also include this idea of ornament, then you also have to think about how else are we creating a set of cultural values. And what we've been doing is we've been creating murals. So the mural project, the Charlottesville Mural Project, began in 2012. And the very first mural that one of the very first murals was a mural that they placed exactly 1 block away, like it's right there. Walk out the door and go over there, it's right there, right? And the interesting part for me for this mural is the underpainting, which they acknowledge. So where we're sitting right now, this is Commerce Street. The street here is 5th Street. If you understand the history of the African American community, this is the center of that history, of that community. And ostensibly, when you walk from Main Street down into 5th Street, you're essentially walking into the historical Black part of Charlottesville, right? In their description of this particular mural, they recognize the underpainting, and I'm hoping you can see, if you see that sort of lattice underpainting on that mural, that lattice underpainting is reiterated on a building right across the street, and that building is the building owned by First Baptist Church. And that First Baptist Church is the original African American Baptist Church in Charlottesville that began its life in 1865. And so, the mural project begins with this mural from 2012. It's called Animalia. It's a mural of indigenous Virginia animals. And again, that's the reason why it caught my attention, because I looked across the street and saw this sort of covenant relationship between the Black face of the church that was now being overlaid with this new sort of interpretation of Charlottesville. And there's also a little plaque on the bottom of that, sort of located a little bit towards the front of the building. And on that plaque it says that the mural projects wants to create a more interesting visual landscape in the city. Right? And so over and over and over, they're beginning to create images in our landscape of the landscape. So defining Charlottesville as this bucolic place. What's interesting to me is if you look at each one of where these murals reside, the top one is outside a restaurant. The top right is in a place of commerce, it's on a store. The bottom one here on the left is the Graduate Hotel. That's, if you walk down Main Street, you're right down the University, it's a Graduate Hotel. And then this one here in the lower right corner is a brewery. And so you begin to start to see Charlottesville through this mural project begin to create a narrative that is tied to a space of commerce. And this narrative articulates, as I want to go back, another set of things that were happening right after the Unite the Right rally was describing Charlottesville as this place of love, right? But this thing could not have happened here in this community because Charlottesville stands for love. But Charlottesville stands for love as defined within this bucolic space. The only transgressive mural that occurred in our public space in relationship to 2017 was this mural, also sponsored by the World Project. It's actually a set of paste ups of all of the activists who were involved in 2017. Jalane, you're in here as well, right? In your image, right? That mural, or that project, lasted 1 month. So if you think about murals and the history of murals as a true discursive space, this is where the alternative actually comments on culture and social activity. That lasted for a month and was replaced with this, which is and continues to be part of our public space. What's interesting about this particular placement of this is the path across this building, up this street, that the activists walked before they turned down Water Street. And then the way it occurred that caused so much violence and destruction. And so this particular mural is called, and I think it's kind of an interesting description of this, is called Trees Together We Grow, and it's from 2019. And so you can see very clearly what it looks like. It's, a bunch of people, ostensibly people, holding hands, rooted to the background, surrounded by the landscape of the Blue Ridge, and the two connecting buildings or public sites are the University of Virginia and the other end of the downtown mall. Right? And so this narrative of returning to this space of normalcy is beginning to be written on our walls. This other mural is a mural by a young woman named Sahara Clemens. It sits outside of a coffee shop. If you're standing in front of that mural and you look to the left of it is the public housing space of West Haven, and if you look to the right of that mural, it is a coffee shop, a restaurant, and then Main Street. So again, creating the relationship between this bucolic place and this place of commerce. And even though this is a black body, if you notice the narrative of that black body, she's in that same sort of landscape. So in some ways, there's an allegorical space that African American bodies live. It is not to say that we don't have historic-based murals in our community. We do. This one on the left is Rose Hill Plantation. And so it describes a particular neighborhood. Liberty Washington Park is the African American park that was purchased by President McIntyre in 1926 and specifically designated as a black park. Surrounded again by, images of place, but images that define a completely different kind of historic space. The other one on the right is Belmont. It's a neighborhood known as Belmont. And you can see that neighborhood is defined as industrial and ends with a brewery at the very end, so bringing us into that future. Belmont is interesting because Belmont, it was the working class neighborhood. President McIntyre bought property there in 1926 and then designated a white park. It is known by African American people who still today, some of them say, I'm not going over there because it was one of the most racist communities in Charlottesville. So again, the murals aren't talking about those histories, they're talking about a different kind of history. And I could keep going. This is yet another one, a historical mural of African American history that was removed within a month. And what remains in our public landscapes are these sort of tropes of blackness, but never without placing them in this environment. So I guess the argument that I'm trying to make here is, as you're starting to think about what can you build, what is it that you're building in relationship to? What's the conversation that an object that we would create in sorts of the plowshares would have to respond to in order to be one that a community could engage with. And so this brings me back into the landscape, it brings me back into the space. What you're looking at here is a map from 1860 that articulates the slave population in Virginia, and Charlottesville is right in here, this area here. And so when Dr. Schmidt was showing you the picture of those people standing in wearing those white shirts, talking about the 52%, that was the narrative. It was that many people who were enslaved in Charlottesville in 1860, in contrast to the entire state of Virginia, where it was only 31% of the populace that was enslaved. We have been working, and this is the overall map of Albemarle County, with Charlottesville being that weird fuzzy thing in the sort of dead center of it. And that's a pull-up of that. What's interesting to me about this notion of public space and what we, again, need to think about and contend with is the idea that very recently, about 3-4 months ago, Charlottesville was described as the 5th happiest place in the country. And the reason why is because the residents live within 10 minutes of walk of a park. 84% of the people who live here live within that residency. If you look at this sort of map below here, the areas in purple are those parks. If you continue to sort of think about what that looks like, these are our parks. That's the map again. Those parks are either engaged with the landscape of enslavement in our central urban landscape, or they're built in proximity. We've been working on a project that is about the development of white residents through covenant maps, through racial covenants. And you can see, just even in this line, that white residency is being developed in relationship to these public parks. And so this is one of the things that we're going to begin to dig into as we start to think about what stores and plowshares looks like. We've amassed a group of partners that are going to help us really sort of understand the legacy of enslavement. Going back to that 1926 law that made it illegal for blacks and whites to occupy public space, it ostensibly made it illegal for blacks and whites to occupy these public parks. Right? And so the question is, can swords and plowshares create an object that is not just about the 1924 Robert E. Lee statute, but is also about this long history of black displacement in public space, as Dr. Schmidt said. And so that's our outcomes. The one first thing that we've been working on to this point is a survey that we launched in February. We have up to this point, it says 342, but I still have to put in 16 more surveys. So in a month or so, we've acquired almost 350 responses to the survey. And you're seeing the sort of racial breakdown and then also the age breakdown of those people who have been interested in the process that we are engaging with. And I think that as you start to look at who those 60 to 79-year-olds are and what those responses are, lots of those people want us to put swords and plowshares that object back into into Market Street Park, which is the park where the Lee statue originally was placed. And so our next goal is to continue the kind of education that Dr. Schmidt talked about, this sort of engagement with the history, with causing of our community to really think about our landscapes as a broader space of a longer history of race, racism, white supremacy in our community. So that's where we are. Leslie, can you put the lights up? Hopefully believe that makes sense. Do you all have any questions about what you saw or ideas that you want to share with us about the project or where we are, or where we started or where we ended? Go ahead.
My question is because on the slide, do you, like in terms of like the racial demographics and like the Asian demographics, like is there kind of a consideration of whose voice you may want to, whose voice you want to censor more, making sure that voices that may be underrepresented in this demographics?
I think one of the things that is most important for this survey, the reason why we're doing the survey is because ultimately we've got other processes coming up. The survey is meant to ask the community where does the statute go, number one. And then number two, it's meant to sort of move into that space of what does a cultural landscape describe? Who has the opportunity for voice? Our desire is for a democratic conversation. We need to target a descendant population. We need to ultimately begin to bring in those voices who in 1924 had no voice for any of those objects to be placed in our community. The interesting thing is the Lee statute was installed in May of 2024. And so we want to mark that date with some sort of reckoning about that, whether it be a cleansing of the place or the ability to lift up those voices through that. So we'll continue our community engagement. I've got something set up that I'm working on for March 27th with a group called the Black Professional Network. And that's a group of about 100 or so African-American people between the age, just how old do you think they are?
Various ways.
Yeah. Yeah, so those kind of very targeted conversations that we hope to have. Engaging in churches, moving out of this space into the broader community to be really more directed. We're putting together a advisory committee, and that advisory committee are those voices to help us drive that. I've asked Jess to do it. Jess Harrisburg at the university, she's part of the Equity Center, but she's also one of the leaders of the UVA, the descendant community. Which number is now?
Our membership?
Yeah.
We have about 200 active members, so.
Yeah.
So hopefully descendants of enslaved communities.
Right. So hopefully that number, that is 11.7%, because of that engagement with them, I'd like to see it outnumber the 80% that is white voices.
I was wondering also about engaging the school system and also knowing relatively having been in charities for that long, and some idea was one on the local schools now currently looking at supervision and community justice and whether there's a partnership forming between the student young adults and belongs to both communities, thinking about all of this through that sort of restoration and confidence of recreation.
We have, the Heritage Center has been working with the school system since we opened. So we opened in 2013. We began our projects with them in 2011. And to be honest, I asked about having students fill out this particular survey. And they weren't as, no, but I mean, and so for this particular survey, we asked, one of the things, so we weren't able to do the survey in school, but we were working on a summit with UVA. There was a student summit that's going to happen here in April. So that's 400 students potentially, but we can then begin to talk about this. But we've been working with schools since, I think Dr. Schmidt mentioned something about it, but we've been,
And earlier, sorry, it is not reflected in this. I went to the high schools and there's a QR code, so that the students can submit their responses to the survey. Because after all, this entire campaign began with the high school students. Began with the high school freshmen, Simon and Bryant, this sort of thing. So we want to kind of keep going through there because these are the folks that are going to have to live with us, in the future, stuff. So yeah. So anyway, so that group of students that is not reflected in these statistics here for this most recent survey.
yeah, this is the second engagement here. So the first engagement, we had opportunity there. The second engagement, we're looking for other opportunities than actually being inside the school with the survey. So we're doing another partnership with UVA that has a youth summit, and it's through that youth summit that we'll start to talk about youth restoration and be able to engage with the survey as well. The other thing about it is, Zion and Bryant, when 700 people signed that survey, there's 700 potential people to engage with us here as well. So I think that it's early days. We launched this in February. I'd like to have some good data associated with it by May, so that we really begin a concentrated movement outside of our heads and
I asked about the role of UVA, and so we know in the 1920s, particularly UVA's professors are the head of the next movement, consideration, etc. To what extent have you documented UVA personnel and as an institution being involved in these statutes, supporting these statutes? To what extent is that acknowledged in the classification and this? And where is the university position regardless in the question of care and recreation? In the context of the university language around integrating the university and how that also ties to the questions of gentrification. Part of that. It's current. As a driver of current inequities around race, that's continuity to these dynamics of race. That's a long time.
Yeah, I take up the first part of it, which was about what is the role of UVA in the installation of these statutes. Yeah.
Yes.
So lots of UVA affiliates, graduates, professors, administrators, etc. Committees, fundraising, planning, and then in the eventual installation ceremonies themselves. The documentary, so we watched the snippets of the documentary that I made a couple of years ago. It's called Unveiling, and it's on, there's a link you can go watch on PBS. One of the speeches at a couple of them, at these installation ceremonies are by the president of UVA, kind of like honoring the process, calling in one case Stonewall Jackson, saint of the English race. This is a time when President Alderman is appointing eugenicists, to the medical school faculty. So this whole conversation about race is very deliberate here. So yes, there's definitely UVA involvement in this. In particular, as Dr. Douglas mentioned, at the only remaining Confederate statue in town now is at the UVA Confederate Cemetery there on the roads, over there. And that's in the UVA Cemetery, maintained by UVA for something like 1,100 Confederates, that are buried there. So yeah, and so also the United Daughters of the Confederacy, the earliest chapter, they claim to be the earliest, there's little tips there, started there on the lawn, one of the pavilions, that Professor Gardner was the chemistry
professor, and he started the local chapter of the Confederate veterans, and his wife, the United Douglas and Confederacy chapter. So yeah, UVA is very much implicated, in this Confederate landscaping. And indeed, in 2020, when the county, the Albemarle County was preparing to remove the John Webb statue, some of us kind of try to make an appeal to UVA, hey, why don't you take this in and, put it in, stick it away in storage somewhere, because UVA's fingerprints are all over it, just in terms of installation and all that sort of thing. But anyway, so that's one in Broadway, and that is what inspired Dr. Douglas and I to start storage and file shares project, in order to not let this toxic waste just be sent down the road. But we have to have a plan in place. So that when the moment presents itself, we're like, what are we actually doing? Again, these are physical objects that exist in space. What are we going to do with it? Where is it going to sit? That is the question. And so you have to have a very practical brass tacks answer to it. So anyway, to see that, what we were disappointed, that the UVA would take in that one statue and said, okay, what are we going to do with this next one? Also, I should say, during the, I want my colleague here, Jonathan Mason, to weigh in on this, during the 2016 Blue Ribbon Commission process, this was a series of 6 months of public hearings that were held. Both Dr. Douglas and Dr. Mason were commissioners, trying to hear from the public and gather input about what our public safety should look like. And I wonder if you, John, can describe, there were some of our colleagues, UVA colleagues, that attended these things. Not very many, very few. But how do you characterize those who did speak, UVA faculty now, who did come to the meeting? What was there? What did they have to say?
Well, they were cautious, but my colleague, now retired Gary Gallagher, Civil War historian, made a really crucial point about these statues, that they are not Civil War statues, they are Jim Crow statues. So and that was a really critical point to make us understand it's really not about commemorating the war, it's about celebrating the reestablishment of white supremacy under Jim Crow. And that was critical. That was really but for the most part, UVA faculty was just not involved, and I have to say, you're discovering this, the UVA faculty tend not to be engaged in civic affairs here in Charlottesville. There are, of course, exceptions, but for the most part, it's kind of disengagement with the city, with local politics, local events. UVA, boy, it's great and good business, and the UVA acknowledging, the damage that's done in the past and thinking about repair. Some 6 of 1, half dozen, right? So UVA is capable of running an entire series on UVA and race in its online newsletter, UVA Today. They've been very good. They've been written by some very, very serious colleagues who have looked at segregation at UVA, at eugenics at UVA, at the despicable treatment of African Americans who work for the hospital, work for the university. It's been great. But, you saw how UVA behaved over the rezoning debate. And the UVA very much trying to preserve its empire and to resist the construction of more housing at the very moment that UVA is the engine for displacement and gentrification.
I just want to add to that, you're starting to think about, which is, on the one hand, John's not incorrect about the ways in which UVA faculty are not engaged. But if you look at history of the city councils in Charlottesville, they are populated by UVA faculty. If you look at the histories of things like planning commissions, UVA faculty are on things like that. UVA does drive very directly some of the policy making that happens here. And over and over again, when you're looking at community displacement, it is UVA faculty that are sitting on those boards and making those kind of decisions. So you can't at all say that they're not engaged because they are. They may not be actively streets. They may not be part of those discourses, but they are very much and have always been part of the social narrative of this place and driving that social narrative with the ideologies and theories like eugenics and other things that are being defined and described. You get faculty that we can point to for even the development of a strident notion of segregation, free of what we understand to be the beginning of Jim Crow. So I don't think that we can, it's where you want to put the people and what they do, because it's, in some ways, you can describe it as in cities, and so, these articles that Ron's referring to, those articles are coming out of the commission that is sort of, that I co-chair and Kurt Von Dock co-chairs from the university, and we attempted to create a place where both the community and the university could sit in dialogue about the development of this racial narrative here. COVID happened, so how far that commission did, there is a book published that from University Press that takes those essays from the UVA today and marries them with responses from community members about those issues. So that book is called After Emancipation, which Kurt and I co-edited. So there is some documentation from the commission about those very things that John was talking about. But I don't think that the role of the university in this, you're seeing, who is building the monuments, right? The university built the Kid Foster Monument in reaction to student discourse around race and place. Then the monuments enslaved laborers, right? But for me standing here, no disrespect, those are monuments about national narrative. And what Sorgen Founders has an opportunity to do is to be in response and in conversation with that national narrative by engaging with the very community that place has engaged with over a spread since its inception.
And I should say, correct me if I'm wrong, that we've got two commissioners right here, that during that 2016 commission process, there weren't very many professors that came to the meetings. As you said, most professors from UVA are not very much engaged in the kind of public discourse. Of those who did, though, my recollection is, and I might be biased since I was on the other side, was that those who did were very cautious about the issue of removal of the statues and advocated keeping them, with the kind of, an attempt to be able like intellectual jiu-jitsu, but it was like, we need to keep them in order to teach us about history, and let's put the plaque, we've been doing but let's put a plaque with small font and lots of caveats to teach us how far we've come. So it was this very heady, kind of approach to things. To again, as I said, this is a material object in physical space. And it's not being confronted by a passerby, with that kind of heady, intellectual apparatus. Anyway, so it was frustrating faculty such as I, that wanted them out of there, when the voice of reason, was coming, what was kind of presented. Let's keep it. But we have all our sophisticated reasons. Here's why we should keep it. I don't know, so what?
There is also a pie in the sky sort of unreality we were working with. right? So on the commission, we were looking at examples like the Whitney Plantation. We were looking at examples like Auschwitz. And we were thinking that places like these plantations and these death camps have been preserved. And it's important that they're there.
But they're on the edge of
But- And so, but we're looking at those and we're thinking, those are shaping our thinking. And it was a learning process for everybody that was on the commission, right? And, one of the things is that, well, you can't do that in the city, right? That this is, I appreciate what they've done there at the camps and at the plantation, but it's not a model for us. But we had to think through that, right? We had to think through, what can you do with these statues, right? And then we had to confront the political reality that there just isn't the will to spend very much money, right? So, as you remember, the Blue Ribbon Commission had not just recommendations about the statues, but recommendations about how the Black history of the city should be memorialized and commemorated. And, when it came to a vote, the council said, yes, this sounds very good, but there's been no will and no money to follow up on those whole other list of recommendations. Right? I mean, we can't even get a plaque for the slave auction. No, I understand that, but Jalane, it's 7 years later, so you understand the lack of will, the lack of finance.
Well, there was the equity package that did sort of push some of this stuff. I mean, the Heritage Center got $150,000.
And the curriculum.
So I think that, one of the things that happened was a lawsuit, right? And if it weren't for Jalane and I sitting down with a city councilor and saying we're going to try and activate this document, we would not have been able to do things. One of the very first things that happened was was certainly the monument tour, but then we pulled together 100 people to take the soil of John Henry James's lynching site, because there was a lynching here in Charlottesville in 1898. We brought all of those people down to Charlotte, to Montgomery, to inter the soil. So it wasn't necessarily, I believe that wholeheartedly that the city of Charlottesville itself was not prepared to deal with its monuments, and that it took outside people to force that conversation. That in fact, that Blue Ribbon Commission document would, as John said, have installed, but on council was the first Black mayor. It was the first Black vice mayor. They were very active in this movement as much as they could be. And I think so there was a certain set of synergies that were happening in this community that has brought us to this place that we are. And I don't know necessarily if you can point to the university as the catalyst for that, because they were certainly activists who were university professors in the street alongside Jalane. But that action had nothing to do with their life as university professors. It had everything to do with their understanding of fascism and of neo-nationalism and the desire to have it not be part of this narrative here. So, as much as we want to bring that space into here, this is the African American Heritage Center. This is the place of Charlottesville actions, and that, as you saw in many of the images that Jalane showed, some of those things happened here. On July 8th, when the Klan came, the city of Charlottesville said, we should all out be on the streets. They asked me to come up with an idea for something to do that would keep people off the street. We turned to our activist community and did a teaching here with 400 people.
And then we would.
Exactly. Right? So, I think that as we start to look at this process, the other day I was talking to the attorney that, right after the Heritage Center fired the robbery of the statute, we were sued. And that lawsuit lasted a year and a half. So this object has been in litigation now for 7 years. And so,
All the way to the Supreme Court of Virginia, and also in the legislature, the General Assembly, and this law, I mean, it's just, this goes on, and it's like playing a hit to keep jumping through one after another, you know, and yeah, fortunately, they kind of carry this, you know.
well, we all understand, this is just a physical place where that occurs, but I think it is really a testament to the community and to people like John and others who live here, who understand that they live here, who almost live in Washington, D.C. here.
That's why it's just coming in the sidewalk.
Right. Who participates in this place as someone who goes to church and who, you know, goes to Mel's to have his lunch and knows people, and it's not about that outbreak, that place. It's all about, we hope this place.
And I give a shout out just to the activist community here in Charlotte. There was a moment during those 6 months of hearings that the Blue Ribbon Commission held where you could feel a siege. Because I think I told you, Julie, at the time, that the conversation had been sort of trending against people who wanted to make substantial change or remove the statutes, right? The people who were showing up tended to be people who were defenders of the statutes and defenders of the status quo. And those of us on the commission who either wanted to get rid of or transform them were feeling like we didn't have much backing out there in the audience. And I said, bring some people to these meetings. And Jalane brought people to the meetings. And the moment you could feel a change is when you all showed up in those white t-shirts that said 52%. That was a moment where those of us on the commission could feel, all right, the winds have changed, it's at our back now. That was a spectacular intervention, you know? And it's not just an intervention, of course, in the life of the Blue Ribbon Commission, but, you know, that act changed the way people think about this place. This is a place where most people were black, most people were enslaved, right? That the coming of the Union forces was Liberation Day. It wasn't a defeat. It wasn't a humiliation. It was freedom. And you guys did that.
You know, people, there was a latent, it was latent, but there was a community, you know, there were people there that wanted these things out of it. But it was about coalescing, and that's the word of organizing, community organizing. It's making people recognize that, oh, actually, I am part of the constituency. That's so on any issue, whatever it is you're trying to do, whether it's affordable housing, gun control, or whatever, you know, it's like realizing that, oh, they're actually the majority. We've seen show up, they're articulating that, you know, 52%. It's actually the majority. People. These statutes have been lying to us since day one because the majority of people here were elated when union soldiers were.
They focus.
Yeah, we have receipts, you know, and the union soldiers died. So, yeah, it's about coalescing, but it does take also institutional homes like Jefferson School, you know, and other institutions to kind of, you know, to be a rallying place, you know, where folks can organize and channel that energy. It's important, whether it's through the commission, whether it's through city council, sometimes the courts, sometimes the General Assembly of Virginia, you know, but there has to be, you know, it's a kind of organic, you know, but you know, definitely, you know, coalescing folks and forward, marching. Yeah, it's March.
We're ending it.
Yeah, we started, I think we say it started with a 17-year-old.
15 she was.
She was 15.
She was 15 at the time. there was an assignment, it was just, if you'll recall, in June 2015, the massacre at Notre Dame Church happened. And then, and I'm not saying this is causal, but it is interesting, historical fact, the next day was when that man came down the escalator and announced his candidacy. Anyway, so that fall semester, this young activist, Jalane Schmidt, families from around here, had an assignment. If there's something you could change about your community, what would it be? And she wrote an essay like, I would want to get rid of these Confederate statues. And it was, of course, she's a very bright person, and you should make this into a petition, which she did. Put it on what do you call it, change.org or something like that, you know what I mean? And got hundreds and hundreds of, well, it resonated. I said, yeah, this is offensive to me. You don't like it being me either, 700 people signed it. And the city council member, young black man, said, wow, yeah, we should bring this on to city council. Brought that on, early in 2017. And again, this is coinciding with, or 2016, early 2016. And then just coinciding with the Trump campaign. That cannot be, the influence of that was toxic, or just made things more toxic, let's put it that way. So then, yeah. And then, city council decided, let's examine it. So, but yeah, it started with the team, that wanted to change, and it resonated with a lot of people.
She's still organizing too.
She's still organizing. She's now a master's student in history at UVA. She's a master's student in history at UVA. Yep. All right. So, thank you, folks.
I can tell you being from South Carolina, it's like, we have some, I think some similar ones here. But one about that they have, I actually wrote an essay in the current year for arguing the same thing. I said, Trump irrigation.
But that was the argument.
I mean, we had, the thing about politics in South Carolina is I kind of want to see when they get their deep in college, they're not talking well, that's not one left. And then they're working on construction. The arts hall,
just raise your hand, they will put you to work. And that was when you started to realize. And the next day, the Ivy Leagues canceled their basketball season. I think you said something.
Yes,
You
Yeah.